Spokane Valley could become a sanctuary city of a different
Councilman
kind.
Caleb Collier says that this
I'm proposing that the city of Spokane Valley issue a proclamation stating that our city is a Second Amendment sanctuary city.
Welcome to the fire.
Today on Church and State, was Paul McCartney killed and replaced with a body double with Richard Syrett? Hello, Christian Patriots, and welcome to Church and State, where we drive morality and religion over tolerance and apathy. And I'm your host, Caleb Collier, once again, your favorite far-right shock jock, and the show that talks about politics and religion. Jesus Christ is our referee, so it's always nice and clean. Real quick, I'm going to point you to the website, churchandstate.media. Fill out the registration form so you can get our newsletter, and of course, a personal phone call from yours truly. While you're on the site, check out our most recent episodes. We're continuing to cover just some hard-hitting information, stuff that you're not seeing in a lot of other places. So check them out. Also, look at our featured guests. We've had some incredible people over the years, and with every single one of those, you can just click on their name and listen to the episode right there. Also, peruse through the great affiliates that we have. We're bringing on some new ones. I'll be talking about one of those at the break. But they're great companies that I support, that I personally use. And I want you to check them out as well. And with every single one of those, just use the promo code Church and State. Also, hit the donate button for us. Keep us on the air. We're growing. We're on NRBTV, Prepper Broadcasting Network, now with CDM. New ones coming on board. And, of course, the ability to be nationally syndicated on AM/FM radio. We're looking to grow, and we need your help to do so. So please hit that donate button for us. Lastly, if you want to get a hold of us, churchandstate1776 at proton.me. With that, oh man, I just had this guest on, Richard Syrett, and he was talking about Kurt Cobain and that he had possibly been murdered. But he's written this book, Tales from the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone. And he has another discussion about Paul McCartney, and I had to book him again. So we're bringing back on Richard. He's the host of Strange Planet, author, incredible individual, does many appearances on Coast to Coast. And Richard, it is a pleasure to have you on Church and State again.
Hey, Caleb, the pleasure's all mine. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. I see this happening quite frequently, actually, because you're just a really incredible person to talk to. And, Paul McCartney. Now, I grew up in a Beatles home. And in fact, if I ever want to anger my mom, my brother, and my dad, I'll make little jokes like, the Beach Boys were better than the Beatles. And oh my gosh, the whole family gets spun up and dinner is just a yelling match and I'm just sitting back because I like to throw a hand grenade in the room. But I am a big Beatles fan. And so to hear, and this is a conspiracy theory that a lot of people have talked about, that Paul McCartney may have died in a car accident and been replaced with a body double is fascinating to me.
It is probably the most enduring conspiracy theory or legend or rumor, not only in rock history, but perhaps in all of popular culture. And it supposedly happened almost 60 years ago, November the 9th, 1966, according to the legend. Now, spoiler alert, I don't believe that Paul McCartney died in a fiery car crash in 1966 and was replaced by a body double. For me, in order to believe that, you have to believe that EMI or the Beatles or MI6 or whoever it was managed to find a look-alike left-handed bass player who was arguably more talented than the original. Because when you look at the body of work pre-1966 and post-1966, yes, the real, I'll put that in quotes, the real Paul McCartney wrote Yesterday and some great songs prior to 1966. But then you look at what came after, Hey Jude and Let It Be and The Long and Winding Road and all of the great stuff that he did with Wings and some of his great solo work. So for me, that's kind of a bridge too far that they replaced him. However, it is still an important sociological phenomena to examine for a number of reasons. First and foremost, this legend began nearly 60 years ago, as I say. He supposedly died in 66, but the legend really took root in 1969 on a college campus in Davenport, Iowa. And people started calling into radio stations in 1969. But this is decades and decades before the internet and decades before social media. And yet this rumor, this legend, spread by word of mouth, radio station after radio station, newspaper after newspaper, and just spread like wildfire, and persists to this very day. That, to me, is what I find absolutely fascinating. And the other thing is the clues that people are looking at, whether it's on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which we'll get into, or Abbey Road, or the Magical Mystery Tour, or the backward masking, the backward lyrics encoded in some of the Beatles songs. Those are all there. They're all real for the most part. So then the question is, well, who put them there and why? So we can get into all of that, but you're right. It is an enduring legend that just will not go away.
And rightfully so. I mean, as far as bands go, despite my teasing of my parents and my brother, the Beatles is definitely one of the biggest bands that have ever existed, and their contributions to rock and roll are well documented. And so many of the people that we're listening to now will point directly to the Beatles as something that influenced them.
Absolutely. And that is part of the reason this legend persists, because, I mean, if this was about, I don't know, forgive me, I love the Monkees, but let's say there was a rumor that Peter Tork had died in 1967 and was replaced by a body double. Sorry, Peter Tork, the late Peter Tork, God bless them, the Monkees, Michael Nesmith et al., but this legend wouldn't have legs, I don't think. It might be kind of a cultural oddity and maybe a trivia question on that board game Trivia Pursuit from the 1980s. But it wouldn't endure the way this legend, because remember, the Beatles, at the time that Great Britain was coming out of the Second World War, they were teetering on the brink of economic collapse. They had lost their standing as the British Empire, the sort of the leader of the free world. The sun was never sets in the British Empire. That was all gone after the Second World War, and their economy was bruised and battered. And so the last thing that they needed was for their arguably one of their most important exports to suddenly just collapse and fall apart. So that's part of the argument as to why, if in fact McCartney did die, why they would replace him. They had to keep this moneymaker going. The executives at EMI and George Martin and perhaps the other three Beatles, the surviving Beatles, begrudgingly agree to this. Suddenly the Beatles stop touring because the lookalike they have isn't quite exactly, doesn't look exactly like Paul McCartney. So let's have him grow a mustache, and let's take the Beatles off the road, and they'll hide in the studio and continue to, produce great content.
Sure, absolutely. And it would also make sense for why there seemed to be this growing animosity between John Lennon and Paul McCartney as well.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of there's always there's his side, the other side, and then there's the truth. And I don't know, Paul McCartney has, or had at least, a bit of a reputation for being a revisionist when it came to the Beatles' history. Now there's only two of them left, of course. So I don't know what to make of that. I know that we were told that tensions were very high during the recording of Abbey Road, and prior to that, Let It Be. Even though they were released in reverse order, Let It Be was recorded prior to Abbey Road, but Let It Be was released later. But then if you look at Peter Jackson's film, during the recording of Let It Be, there's just so much, there just seems to be so much, love and joy in the room. And even Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, when they watched the screening of the film, all of this previously unseen footage from those sessions, they were shocked. They sort of had assumed that things were kind of nasty and bitter too. But again, we're looking back 60 years. But I suppose you could make that argument that had Paul McCartney been replaced by William Shears or Billy Campbell, who are the two names that are most commonly referred to as the replacement, sure, I mean, he would be seen as an imposter who was, foisted upon the band. And, McCartney and Lennon had known each other since the late 50s. and had grown quite close. So to have this interloper suddenly arrive on the scene, one could imagine, if true, that that would cause a great deal of friction and perhaps, yes, animosity.
Absolutely. And so let's go to the car accident. Let's go to that, and then we can expand into some of the things you were talking about with the hidden tracks and the images and some of the album covers. But can you describe what occurred with the accident to the audience?
So again, according to the legend, 3 of the 4 Beatles are in studio, Abbey Road studio, recording Sgt. Pepper. John Lennon has taken a break from recording, and he is in Spain. He's shooting a movie called How I Won the War. Now, the 3 Beatles are hunkered down, and of course you can imagine the pressure. They're trying to, this album is so important to them. This is going to be their tour de force. And it would go on, of course, to be considered one of the greatest albums of all time. And so McCartney supposedly is just feeling this pressure, and it's raining outside, and George Martin perhaps, is saying to him, "Come on, Paul, we got to get this track done. We got to get this track done." And McCartney just says, "No, I got to take a break. I got to get out of here." So he runs out into the rain, jumps into his Aston Martin, and peels off. And he picks up a hitchhiker. And she doesn't realize her name is Rita, supposedly, and she doesn't realize that she's just jumped into the car with Paul McCartney, the Beatle, the cute Beatle, as he would become known. But once she realizes that it's Paul McCartney who's sitting next to her, she just starts flailing her arms and is just, it's Beatlemania all over again in the car. McCartney is trying to quiet her down and to calm her down, and he blows right through a red light and gets broadsided by, I believe it's a truck, a lorry, as they call them in England. And the car is just totally destroyed. And according to the legend, Paul McCartney is in fact decapitated. And that supposedly happened on November 9th, 1966.
Okay, so there's the accident. And did Rita survive this accident?
That's a good question. I've never heard, although her name would survive because her name Rita would be turned into a song on the album. Lovely Rita, Rita Maid. Nothing can come between us is the lyric. Well, something apparently did. It was a Mack truck. But I'm not even sure whether, according to the legend, whether Rita survived or not.
Okay, excellent. So then from there, we get kind of some strange songs that appear. I mean, one of the strangest Beatles songs out there is number 9, which when played backwards says, "Turn Me On, Dead Man." You get the imagery with Abbey Road of Paul McCartney looking like he's a corpse, like he's going into a coffin, no shoes on him as he's crossing the street. So can you explain to the audience all this imagery?
Right. So let's start with some lyrics, song lyrics. "A Day in the Life," which is perhaps one of the greatest Beatles songs of all time. I happen to think it's just, I think it's a masterpiece. And the lyrics forward, we're not talking about backward masking. He blew his mind out in a car. He hadn't noticed that the lights had changed. That's kind of held up as one of the most blatant, obvious clues. According to legend, McCartney hadn't noticed that the light had changed. He was trying to console lovely Rita, and he went right through the red light and gets smacked by a truck. You mentioned number 9. Revolution 9 is, I hesitate to call it a song. It is more of a sound collage, and it's on the White Album, released in 1968. And in fact, George Martin didn't want that track. George Martin did not, that's a double album. George Martin didn't want that track on there. He didn't think that was indicative of the Beatles' best work. He thought it should have been a single album. The Beatles, by this time, were pushing back a little bit than they did earlier in their career, and they insisted on number 9 being on there. But if you listen to Revolution 9, it's a kind of an odd sound collage, street noises, and sounds gathered in a soccer stadium. And anyway, if you play a portion of it backwards, yes, you can hear Lennon saying, "Turn me on, dead man, turn me on." There's also backward masking in Strawberry Fields Forever. I buried Paul. Now, Lennon later denied this and said and claimed that what he was actually saying was cranberry sauce. I don't know how you get cranberry sauce out of "I buried Paul." There are some other examples, I think, that I mentioned in the book as well, but those are the two prominent from Revolution 9 and Strawberry Fields. I buried Paul. And
what about the walrus is Paul? Because that's another line.
Oh, yes, the walrus is Paul. Where does that one come from? Geez, I'd have to go back and check the chapter. It's chapter 2 in the book, Tales from the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone, but that's another one, yes. And just a quick note, The Walrus Was Paul actually became the title of a book that was written by my late partner, R. Gary Patterson. And R. Gary Patterson, I think, wrote the definitive book about the Paul is Dead legend, and he is kind of walking through all the clues, and we spent hours before I passed away talking about all of the clues, and he loved to sit down with a mirror, a straight edge mirror, and show me, how these clues could be seen using a mirror on Sgt. Pepper. And coincidentally, R. Gary Patterson died on May 22nd, 2017, May 26th, 2017, which was the exact 50th anniversary of the release of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. But the book that he wrote was called The Walrus Was Paul.
Wow. Okay. So let's get into the albums here. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, very, very strange album cover. As you look at it, there's a lot of figures in here. One of them is Aleister Crowley, which is a very, very dark figure in history. But there's other imagery as well that people point to show evidence of this legend that Paul McCartney was killed.
The entire album really looks like it's very funereal. It looks like a funeral scene, and there is, for example, and we're not going to get to all of the clues because they're just almost countless clues in there. You'll see a bass guitar made of flowers. So you can imagine, if you were going to go to Paul McCartney's funeral and you wanted a flower arrangement, maybe you would order a flower arrangement that looks like a bass guitar. Well, it's a left-handed bass guitar, and one of the strings is missing. So it's a 3-stringed bass guitar, not 4. Well, why? What would the clue there be? Well, there are 3 out of the 4 that are present at the funeral. One is missing. Who is that? Well, it's Paul McCartney, of course. You'll also notice that there is a little doll, and this doll is in the lap, seated in the lap of someone, and a man, and the man is wearing a bloody racing glove or driving glove on his left hand. So the blood on the driving glove, obviously, or not obviously, but perhaps referring to the car crash. We have the bass drum. I think you got it up there on the screen. That's great because I mentioned the straight edge mirror. If you were to take a straight edge mirror and you would hold it up so that it intersects horizontally across Lonely Hearts, which are in the middle of that bass drum, and what you'll get is reflected in the mirror above the Lonely Hearts is I-O I-X. I can't remember now. I don't have a mirror in front of me, but essentially it spells out it's almost like an epitaph, and it gives the date of the death of Paul McCartney. I-O would be, I'm sorry, I-X, my apologies. I-X, that would be 9. And then you have X-I, that would be 11. And then he die, it says. So 9/11, he die. November 9th, he die. Paul McCartney dies on November the 9th, according to the legend, 1966. Just trying to see here as I look at the album cover what I'm missing. Oh, Paul McCartney. There's a figure holding his hand above Paul McCartney's head like this. Now, in Eastern mysticism, that's often seen as kind of an occult symbol for death. When you put your hand over someone's head, that they're dead. It's almost like some sort of blessing of the person who's passed away. See if I'm missing anything. I'm sure I am, but those are some of them. So basically, it's a funeral scene. The bass drum is, think of the bass drum as the headstone, and then in front of the bass drum, you've got this, looks like a gravesite with all of those flowers there.
I mean, truly fascinating, the imagery in this, and people have studied this cover in particular for a lot of different clues, a lot of different people in the background. I mentioned Aleister Crowley, but when I'm looking at this, you know, I'm kind of questioning. I'm wondering, like, was this all part of a publicity stunt by the Beatles? You know, because that's one of the other theories out there, is that, you know, they just embraced this and ran with it because it sold more albums and retained their popularity.
Well, if you subscribe to the legend and you believe that he did die, Paul McCartney did die, then you might think that the surviving Beatles were leaving breadcrumbs for the fans. Because why? Because maybe they felt remorse, they felt guilt that they were, you know, pulling one over on the fans, that they had replaced their beloved Paul McCartney with a body double, a faux Paul, as he became known. And so this was the Beatles, the surviving Beatles' way of secretly communicating with the fans. Yes, Paul is dead. We're sorry. We had no choice. We had to do this. They're making us do this. So they left these clues for the Beatles. If you don't believe that Paul McCartney died, and I don't believe he died in that crash, then it becomes, yes, a clever marketing ploy, or simply the Beatles just having some fun with it, because the Beatles were, yes, they were tremendously talented musicians. But they were also, if you listen to some of those early interviews they did when they first came to America, they were funny guys. Mm-hmm. They were fans of some of the great British comedians like Peter Sellers and Peter Cook, and some of the early British comedy troupes from the 60s.
Even did some movies with those guys.
They did. So they loved, you know, their banter was very clever. I remember one line in particular, someone asked John Lennon, "Mr. Lennon, how did you find America?" Meaning, how did you like it? How did you find America? "Oh, I turned left at Greenland." Yeah, they were great wordsmiths, and so steeped in that tradition on wordplay. And so I could see the four of them sitting around and saying, "Let's have a bit of a laugh here. Let's encode some clues into the songs, into the album covers, and so forth." Now, staying with Sgt. Pepper's for a moment, the song, the opening refrain, you know, what would you say if I sang out of, or what would you think if I sang out of tune? You know, in other words, what if you hear Paul McCartney singing and he doesn't quite sound like Paul McCartney? What do you think about that? And there's also the line, of course, I'd like to introduce to you the one and only Billy Shears and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Well, who is Billy Shears? Well, if Paul McCartney was replaced, one of the likely candidates was a guy by the name of William Shepherd. My apologies, William Shepherd. Now, William Shepherd was in a Beatles tribute band, and London and Liverpool and England was awash in Beatles tribute bands at this time. So if they wanted to find someone who sounded like Paul McCartney and knew the material, they wouldn't have had a hard time. There were so many Beatle tribute bands at the time. But William Shepherd was in a band called Billy Pepper and the Pepper Pots. They were a Beatles tribute band, and so if they selected him, his name was William Shepherd. It's kind of, think about it. What does a shepherd do? He shears sheep, right? So they changed his name from William Shepherd, and in the song they refer to him as William Shears. He shears sheep. So again, a kind of a play on words here.
Interesting, too, because the public
clue,
would be the sheep, right?
There you go.
There you go, right there. It's really interesting. And just to attest to something that you said, as far as Beatles humor, I would suggest to the audience, check out the movie Hard Day's Night, because that humor is on full display right there. It's very witty, actually. And I'm not typically a big fan of musicians that turn out movies, but that's actually a pretty good movie there. When I'm looking at this and you know, the potential for a body double, you know, this isn't the first time we've heard about this conspiracy theory with body doubles. And famously, Joe Biden is one of those ones. And people will point to like his earlobes not connecting and things like that. Was there anything with the faux Paul, as they say, that people point to that say, you know, that this is different from the real Paul McCartney?
Yes, there were some photographic analysis performed on a series of photos that were taken of Paul McCartney and Jane Asher, who was his girlfriend at the time. And so we're looking at about 1965, 1966. This is before Linda McCartney. Paul McCartney was dating Jane Asher. And if you look at the photos, you know, pre-November of 1966, Paul appears, well, he's around 5'10", 5'10 and a half. Jane Asher was around 5'5". So when you see them together, he's a little bit taller, not a whole lot taller. And then you see photographs of Paul McCartney and Jane Asher post November 1966, and he seems to be much, much taller. Now, you could argue, well, maybe in one set of photographs he was barefoot, and then the other he had his shoes on, or she was barefoot, and then she put, you know, she took her shoes off in the other photo, or the angle might be different. You know, these are all contributing factors. But there was a team of Italian researchers who analyzed these photos, and not only of Paul standing beside Jane Asher, but also they looked at Paul McCartney's jawline and his earlobes. You mentioned Joe Biden and the earlobes. They're very telling. They're like fingerprints, earlobes. They're very unique to each individual. And they maintain that it's a different Paul, November 66 and post-November 1966. There was also vocal analysis performed by a researcher, I believe in Miami, and he looked at 3 tracks, one pre-1966, one 1967, and I think one 1970. I think the 1970 song was The Long and Winding Road. I can't remember the other 2 songs, but one was, you know, before Paul supposedly died, one just after. He claims, according to his analysis of the voice prints, that there were 3 different voices. The original Paul, maybe one was William Campbell, and the other one was William Shepherd. So 3 different Pauls. Now
fascinating stuff. I actually got to break in here, sir. I apologize, but we got that hard break right here. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're obviously not done yet. Very fascinating interview. This is Caleb Collier with Church and State. Are you tired of your device spying on you? Ladies and gentlemen, we live in 1984. Your phones, your tablets, your smart televisions, they all are spying on you. And this is why I heavily endorse Mark37.com. This is everything you need for your digital privacy. Phones, tablets, laptops, all of them are ghost protocoled. So that means that you are in charge of your own data. Just go to churchandstate.media, scroll over to shop, and hit mark37.com for all of your privacy needs. Make sure to use that promo code Church and State. And we are back, and thank you for staying with us. And you're over at churchandstate.media, and we're going to go right back to our guest. But real quick, let me plug one of our great affiliates, and we got a new one, ladies and gentlemen. If you like cigars, boy, do I have a treat for you. We are now partnered with Liberty Cigars. I personally enjoy a cigar, some little bit of whiskey, a great discussion about theology as we surround ourselves with that. But we've got a Father's Day special that is being ran right now with Liberty Cigars. If you use that Church and State promo code, you're going to get a discount on that. Obviously, you got to fill out that you are of age. thanks to the government on that one. But go check them out, ladies and gentlemen. Liberty Cigars. Go check out that Father's Day special. It's for a limited time, so it's only around for a little bit. And use that promo code Church and State. Get some amazing cigars from Liberty Cigars. They also give you a history lesson, so please check them out. Also, one more time, hit the donate button for us, ladies and gentlemen. Just please get us to where we can be nationally syndicated. We really want to pursue that. All right, with that, let's go back to our guest, Richard Syrett of strangeplanet.ca, and we'll show that website here in a little bit. Richard, I had to cut you off. I hate doing that. It's the nature of the beast. Please continue with what you were saying.
Oh, yes, vocal analysis of Paul McCartney, and 3 different tracks were sampled and analyzed, and this researcher was supposed to appear on a television show, I think, again in Miami, and did not show up. Now, when someone doesn't show up, and there's silence, there's different ways of interpreting that. We tend to, the silence can be interpreted as either he didn't stand for he wasn't willing to stand up for what he believed in, and maybe he was perpetrating a hoax, and that his findings were bogus. Again, he claimed that they were 3 different people singing on those 3 Paul McCartney tracks. Or I suppose you could fill that silence, that void, with another interpretation, which would be that somebody got to this forensic analyst and scared him or threatened him and prevented him from going on live television and announcing his findings.
Truly, truly fascinating. The book is Tales from the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone, and you can see that at strangeplanet.ca. There we go. Chris has got it up for the audience right there. Fantastic website. I'm looking forward to reading this book. Last time I had you on, we were talking about Kurt Cobain, and there's a lot of these conspiracy theories or legends throughout rock and roll, and you actually went through the history of some of that on our previous episode. But these people getting replaced, you now have people like Avril Lavigne, who is rumored to have been replaced as well. There's a lot of this going on. I think clearly there's something there, or is it just imagination of the public going wild? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, the idea of a body double, that's been around with us for some time. Jimmy Carter, I remember there were claims that Jimmy Carter may have been replaced by a body double. And we're talking about, somewhere between 1976 and 1980 when he served as president. I can't remember the exact incident. It seemed to me that he had collapsed during, he was out jogging and he collapsed while he was taking a run with his Secret Service people. And someone just thought when they looked at the news footage that he didn't seem quite right. He didn't seem like James Earl Carter. So it's been around for quite a while. And, we've been sort of informed by popular culture, and there have been movies about clones and body doubles. We were watching, I think it was called Dave.
I was about to bring up Dave, actually. So there you go.
Months with Kevin Kline, with the president, who's a real scoundrel, is felled by a stroke, and he's in a coma, and he's replaced by a celebrity lookalike who is just some, average guy on the street who happens to look like the president. So we've been fascinated with this for a very long time, and now, and then if we go back, to Dolly the sheep and the idea of being able to clone, and that was, 50 years ago. Is it possible that we have now the ability to clone human beings, not just sheep, but human beings? That's above my pay grade, but when you look at the rapidity of technology and technological progress, it's certainly possible, I think. And then there have been some outlandish claims, made by the Russians or the Chinese that they have cloned human beings. And there are legions of people who actually believe this is possible. And then you mentioned Avril Lavigne, of course, Jim Carrey. People are wondering, what's going on with Jim Carrey.
That was a strange one.
It was a strange one. Plus, he's also, in previous interviews on the red carpet, he'll show up at some event and he'll say strange things like, "I'm not really here. I don't exist." So this all fuels this speculation. Now, back in 1966, they just had to find someone who looked close enough to Paul McCartney. And again, because the Beatles were no longer touring, was that the reason they stopped touring? And they would hide him in studio, grow a little bit of facial hair. So, it's not surprising that we've arrived, particularly with the advent of artificial intelligence, and now you don't actually need to construct a clone. You just need to, make the right prompt in ChatGPT, and they'll produce the clone for you. And all of a sudden, we have Michael Jackson on a bus in Argentina, who's now 60-some years old. And I had to look at it a couple of times before I realized, okay, wait a minute, no, this is AI. It's getting harder and harder to tell, however. We also have, some incredible, rubber masks. I've seen people put on a rubber mask, and it just instantaneously changes that person into somebody else, and it's very difficult to tell that they're wearing a mask. Sometimes the mask slips, or appears to slip, and we see, something sticking out of Joe Biden's neck,
or like that colonel on Fox News that had the little slit right here at his throat.
Yes, yeah. So this all just fuels the speculation. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, once again, fascinating interview about this subject. I wanted to, what I did the first time I interviewed you, and I want to, approach a different subject with you. And I know that you talk a lot about aliens, and I'd love to get your thoughts on Steven Spielberg's new movie, Disclosure. And he actually did an interview where he said that this movie was going to force Christians to question their faith and their religion. What are your thoughts on a statement like that?
I'm not surprised. Hollywood has been shaping this narrative, for quite some time. And for me as a Christian, I've stated this many times on Coast to Coast and on my other, on other various platforms. The only way that the UFO alien phenomenon makes sense from biblical perspective is that these are interdimensionals. We're not talking about extraterrestrials. I do believe that we are alone in the universe, unless you include hyperdimensions and other dimensions as part of the universe. But in terms of extraterrestrials, I don't believe they exist. We are alone. God created this universe and its beauty for us. We're uniquely positioned in the universe so that we can, only from our perspective here on Earth are we able to see certain, the eclipse of the sun and things like that. It's all pointing to design, as far as I'm concerned. But I do believe that what's going on now, whether we're talking about alien abductions, this has to be understood. We have to put this through the biblical filter and understand it, that these are coming from the demonic realm or the angelic realm, if you'd rather. That's the way that I approach the whole ET issue. It's not very popular because UFOs and aliens have become almost like a religion unto themselves. Even if it was proven that these are extraterrestrials, and I don't think it ever will be, it doesn't change my faith. I still believe Jesus Christ died for our sins and rose 3 days later, just as he said he would. But it doesn't make sense that there would be extraterrestrials, these interlopers coming and intervening in this human story that is laid out so beautifully in the Bible. It doesn't make sense unless they're from the demonic or the angelic realm. So, and Hollywood, I think, has been trying to manipulate, I get into this in the book about how pop culture has been co-opted and is being used for sociological experimentations and as a psychological weapon, because they've realized that it's more powerful than politics. And if you want to engineer change, if you want to steer the public one way or the other, you do it through popular culture, whether it's music like the Beatles, or whether it's a movie like E.T. or War of the Worlds, or Steven Spielberg's latest Disclosure Day.
Yeah, and you and I are like-minded on this one. I've used this platform to tell Christians, well, anyone listening to the show, there are no such thing as aliens. It is demonic. I've had L.A. Marzulli on the show discussing that. I've had Gary Wayne on the show before talking about the Nephilim. And so, yes, absolutely, when you're dealing with this, and so many of the people who have had alien encounters when they've rebuked it in Jesus' name, that alien has left them. So I think it's pretty clear to us that, yes, these are demonic entities. Are they? Are the governments or the Hollywood elite? Are they in contact with them? I would say more than likely they are. And if we're coming up on the end of the age, are portals being opened? I mean, certainly with like CERN, they talk about that they've opened some portal that they can't close and that there's evil there. So that, yeah, we could be seeing the demonic realm start to enter into our Earth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I go back to, I recently wrote my newsletter about the occult origins of the space program in NASA, going back to Jack Parsons, who, again, we mentioned Aleister Crowley earlier in relation to the Beatles and Sgt. Pepper's. He's on the cover, but Jack Parsons, along with L. Ron Hubbard, were huge fans of and devotees, disciples, if you will, of Aleister Crowley. And Jack Parsons was attempting to reproduce or perform one of Crowley's occult rituals in the desert at a place called Devil's Gate. Not coincidence, I think. He was trying to open a portal, and he went on, of course, to invent solid rocket fuel, which was a huge boon to the space industry. And he sort of hinted to the fact, I don't think he said it directly, but that he was receiving information for these formulas and so forth, from another dimension, from the other side. And it's believed that he did open some sort of a portal. And before he could close that portal, he was killed in a mysterious explosion. And shortly thereafter, of course, we had the massive UFO flap of 1947, and it wasn't just limited to Roswell. We're all familiar with Roswell and in the summer of 47, but there was all kinds of high strangeness going on across America in 1947, including other, many UFO sightings, not just UFOs either. Strange creatures were being seen all over America. Were these entities, did they come through that portal that Jack Parsons, and we should point out Jack Parsons founded JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, but the J and the P probably stood for Jack Parsons before it stood for Jet Propulsion.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you fall on there's basically three schools of thought when we're dealing with alien craft. Military technology, much more advanced than what they're letting us onto. And, obviously there's a lot of examples of tech that the military or the government has that we don't have yet. Project Bluebeam, it's just, they're shooting images up into the sky that aren't actually real, or that it's, demonic tech or demonic entities.
I think it's a mixed bag. I think the majority of them are made in America. I think they're just advanced. We're talking about advanced craft, whether they were built at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or Area 51 or wherever the new Area 51 is. Maybe they call it Area 52 now. Just I think by the time we sort of catch up and figure out what's going on at one location or another, they've moved on and they've relocated. So I don't know that it's necessarily going on at Area 51 anymore, or S4. It may be in another location in Utah. Who knows? But I think most of them are advanced craft. But I think there are legitimate experiences with either demonic or angelic entities. People talk about balls of light and orbs and things like that, that seem to be more of a spiritual quality than nuts and bolts, craft. So, and Project Bluebeam, I recently did a show on Project Bluebeam, and For those not familiar, I mean, this has a Canadian angle. The person who came up with this theory supposedly, had access to these classified NASA documents and U.S. intelligence documents claiming that they were planning on projecting these holographic images into the sky and tricking the population into believing that one, there was an alien invasion, or two, the second coming had arrived. And of course, they would program what this Messiah-like figure was going to tell the people. Wasn't what Jesus Christ was telling us in the Gospels by any stretch. But I think that was 40 years ago that this individual was theorizing about blue beam, and I think blue beam is here now, but I don't think it's the way that he imagined it. I think they're achieving these things with social media, for example, just with algorithms and they're just totally manipulating the minds of young people, and they're steering us in any direction that they want. And to me, that's what Project Bluebeam is about right now. It's not about holographic images in the sky anymore. They don't need that.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, absolutely. And the evidence is just in front of you. They can literally steer the public any direction they want. And, as you were pointing out with that Michael Jackson, like, the deep fakes are so good anymore. It leaves us all questioning, like, where's the truth in this? Because is everything a lie? And you're almost getting this black-pilled approach where you don't believe in anything anymore. Clearly, that's not the direction, because as you and I would always point to, Jesus Christ is Lord, and He is the truth.
Well, that's ultimately what happens. How many times have we seen influencers, social media on YouTube or wherever, who started off as, let's say, agnostic, maybe not atheist, but agnostic, and their whole objective is to pursue the truth. And the further they dig and scratch and pull on loose threads, where do they end up? They end up becoming religious, spiritual, Christian. It happens time and time again, and that is because that is the ultimate truth. And all roads will eventually take you to Jesus Christ, because He is the embodiment of truth. He doesn't just speak the truth. He is truth. And it's inevitable.
That is beautifully said, and not that, like, not in the religious sense of, all religions lead to Jesus. No, that's not what my guest is saying at all. Is when you are doggedly pursuing truth, you will end up at the truth, and capitalized the truth, because that is Christ, that is God. Richard, it is an absolute pleasure. I kept you a little bit long. I apologize, but I so love talking to you that I just couldn't pause here. I want to point everybody to the website again, strangeplanet.ca. This is where you can listen to the show. As I said, my guest is going to be hosting Coast to Coast, which is just absolutely incredible. That'll be on June 14th and June 21st. Both on Sundays. It has the links there so you can listen to it. You can buy the book there, Tales from the Rock and Roll Twilight Zone. Richard, anything else you want to say about the website?
You can also sign up for my newsletter. There it is right now, Inner Sanctum. It's comes out once a month. It's free, and the new issue is just days away from being deployed, and it's all about the tick agenda.
That's another big subject. And, I say this to guests, but I got to have you back because, number one, you're just so fascinating, and you're hitting all these really interesting topics that people want to be informed about. So we'll definitely have to have you back. I'll schedule you again. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on once again. Thank you for your insight into Paul McCartney, into the alien encounters on the previous show with Kurt Cobain, and we also talked about data centers. So I just thank you for your work, and it's a real pleasure to know you.
Caleb, thank you. It's my pleasure anytime. God bless.
God bless you too, sir. All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. A fascinating interview. Paul McCartney, was he killed? Was he replaced? I mean, I leave that up to you, but still, keep digging. Pursue the truth, ladies and gentlemen. Pursue God. Church and State is brought to you in part by Colonial Life Spokane Independent Agents, Finders Insurance, and Mark37.com. I'm Caleb Collier. I was born for a storm.
Welcome to the fire.
Hey, this is Caleb Collier with the Church and State Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I want all of you to go to Galileo.com. You need to stay connected no matter what comes our way. Whether it's government intrusion or a meteor falling from the sky, Galileo has you connected. As a Marine veteran, I can tell you that communications is essential. Galileo has you connected. Whether it's worldwide coverage, uncensored content, or real-time alerts, Galileo is going to make sure that you're connected with your friends, family, and neighbors. Just head on over to churchandstate.media, scroll over to shop, and hit Galileo.com. Make sure to ask them for a free bivy stick, and make sure to use that promo code Church and State. This is Caleb Collier with churchandstate.media. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not sleeping on MyPillow, do you even patriot? I got to tell you, this is the most wonderful stuff from a man who's given it all for your freedoms. Whether it be the pillow, the sheets, or the slippers, I absolutely adore MyPillow. MyPillow has the greatest products around. I know when I want to shuffle around in my bathrobe and slippers and yell at the neighbors, of course I'm buying from MyPillow. I need you to head on over to churchandstate.media, scroll over to shop, because every single time that you purchase any of these products using the promo code Church and State, you ensure that we keep our message out on the air.
I thank everybody for your support in using promo code Church and State. You guys go to mypillow.com/Church and State too, and then you get your own little platform right there, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want all of you to be a walking billboard. Some of us don't have platforms such as Church and State, but you know what? We can wear t-shirts and engage in great conversations with Christians and patriots all across the country. Stand Up Now Apparel is the best t-shirts out there. These are American-made, owned by a Christian and a patriot, and the material, it's like getting a warm hug from yours truly. One of the better things as well is there's no tags. I hate tags. I know you do as well. I don't know how many times I've cut off a tag and ended up with a hole in my shirt. You never have to worry about that with Stand Up Now Apparel. These are the best shirts out there with the greatest messages. Let me give you a few examples. There's a t-shirt out there that says armed with Ephesians 6 on it. I gotta tell you, when I wear this in town, I get a lot of comments and a lot of eyebrow raises. There's other shirts that include pure blood in Hebrew, obviously in reference to the vaccines, and also you can get Church and State merch there as well. We've got our flagship shirt, I Was Born for a Storm, with Church and State right on it. You got to order this shirt. Go to Stand Up Now Apparel for t-shirts and hats, all of this great merch with great Christian and patriotic messages. Remember to use that promo code Church and State.